Hi, this is Shotgun Tom Kelly. Do I have your attention? Well, back in 1979, the exploding car stereo marketplace was crowded with competitors. The company, Alpine Electronics of America. The place, Los Angeles, California. The people, seasoned professionals from several different consumer electronics organizations. So how did a new car stereo brand claw its way up to become an unchallenged premier brand of the USA World Mobile Electronics aftermarket, then go on to earn Tier 1 status with several US and international automotive OEMs in just 15 years? This dynamic team was challenged with creating its own unique culture of approaching the market. It was called the Alpine Touch. Supported at every level, this wasn't just a slogan, it was a way of thinking. Everyone at Alpine believed in doing their very best work, being creative and always focusing on quality. Alpine's team was top-notch. We're lucky enough to have two amazing people here with us to tell us the first ever inside story. Former Executive Vice President of Alpine Electronics of America, Dave Black, and his former Assistant Vice President of Technical Development, Rich Coe. So what were car stereos like even before Alpine?
The radio technology didn't exist until the 1900s, which is a long, long, long time ago. And the technology as far as a radio going into the car, that was even 20, 30 years later. So it was starting really in the 1930s. There was a company, two guys back in Chicago, called Galvin Manufacturing, that actually came up with this idea of taking the radio technology, which they originally had put together, and turning it into a 12-volt type of condition. They came up with in the mid-1930s with a radio that actually was going to be placed in OEM applications, and that radio cost roughly $100, $150. A radio for $150 was 35% of the cost of the car.
Wow.
It was an essential piece to the puzzle. Why? Music was on the brain of everybody at that point. And if you had a car without a radio in it, this is not a good thing. You're going to sell more cars if you put radios in those things. So those guys really had a fuse lit. Galvin Manufacturing, became Motorola Corporation. There was no place to actually buy these things at that point in time. Galvin Manufacturing actually learned post-World War II that there were manufacturing facilities over in Japan that were actually involved in this kind of technology. And they went over there and they talked to the Alps Corporation, which is the parent company of Alpine, and there it began.
So what you're saying is that Motorola was the first company to introduce the 12-volt car radios in the U.S.
Well, there actually weren't car radios at that point in time. Probably safe to say they were really 4-track and 8-track tape players, right?
That's right. They were just, they were 8-track players, basically.
Usually what ended up happening in those days is that the guys that had the best stereo, guess what he got? The best women, right?
That's right. I had a 45 record RPM player in my car, under dash.
Unbelievable. But what ended up happening though is there's a trigger, another fuse gets lit. And that fuse is that 4-track and 8-track under dash type player has been now embraced by a couple of really high profile retailers. One of them was, and everybody's heard these guys before, was Madman Muntz.
Oh, yes.
And he was out in good old Los Angeles.
Yes.
And that guy's a wacko, but he did a great job of running back and forth to Japan and importing these 4-track and 8-track type of products. And then there was a guy that was his namesake on the East Coast, Crazy Eddie.
Oh, I've heard of him.
And my gosh, both of these guys were promoters like you couldn't believe and literally owned the market for the course of the first 10 years that these products were being built. Now the fun thing is that Alps Electronics was right in the middle of it because they were the ones that were actually supplying these products at that point.
So Alps engineered car stereo platforms for Motorola, OEM, and aftermarket. Was Alps the only Motorola supplier?
It's not to say that it was the only manufacturing facility over in Japan that was actually doing this stuff. There were others. But Motorola was a high-profile type company here in the United States, and that relationship really cooked as far as Alpine and Alps' ability to build the products that those people were actually interested in. And there was not a big market yet. It was about ready to explode.
Yeah, that's right. And the fact of the matter is that Muntz came up with multiple speaker systems most of the systems originally had one speaker in the dash. That's all.
Oh, okay.
The first ones that came out were monaural.
Yes,
They were mono.
I remember.
And typically the cars had one speaker in them,
Right.
located typically in the dash or in the rear deck. And mostly what you listened to was AM radio. And FM radio, it started coming in later on, but people really liked listening in the car, regardless of what they were listening to.
That's right.
And these radios were somewhat cumbersome. They were ugly. They had to fit under the dash. Some of them had parts poking out all over the place. I mean, it wasn't something that you looked upon as a thing of beauty. And they weren't easy to install because the cars were not amenable to them. And the radios operated on tubes. They weren't semiconductors back then. So it was really a pre-genesis of this whole business coming forward.
And you had some of the biggest radio stations. Now, me being a radio guy.
I remember I used to listen, and I used to listen to Wolfman Jack.
Oh, yeah, from
Down
Mexico.
from Tijuana.
Actually, before that, from Acuña, Coahuila, Mexico.
Yeah.
150,000 watts, Rich.
And he had his wolf howl on the air, and we
Have
just
mercy,
listened
baby.
with happy faces.
Oh, your peach is sweet, baby. Yeah. Wolf was a friend of mine.
That's
Yeah.
that's right. You
Yeah,
told me
we
those
did a lot of
stories.
fun things together. So Motorola got involved, but how much did they get involved with Alps? I mean, tell us that story.
Motorola didn't have the production capacity
Okay.
to be able to do the kind of thing that Alps did. Alps understood how to build this kind of stuff, and they got a great engineering team, really fantastic. So over the course of the ensuing 8 years or so, that relationship grew and grew and grew to a point where Alps and Motorola decided to do the nasty thing, have a joint venture. And they did in 1967 create a nice joint venture, 50-50 type of deal, and they went on from there to do all kinds of new things within the engineering side, within the manufacturing side, you name it, it was part of this joint venture. The problem was everybody got comfortable. And Alpine was really, or Alps Corporation was really interested in doing something a little more than just building low-end radios. Their idea was, hey, we can build something really spectacular here. Let's try it. And they did. They went ahead and engineered on their own, without talking to Motorola, a brand new platform. And that platform was actually brought to Motorola, given to their marketing and sales group, and said, here's where we think it's going. Only to find out in a relatively short period of time, they said no. They didn't want it.
Motorola said no.
They said, no, we want the more entry-level type of products that you guys have been shipping us in the past. It was too expensive. For their customer base, they felt it was too expensive. So all of a sudden, Alps goes back. They have a little powwow back in Japan, and a decision was made to separate the agreement. So there was not going to be an Alps Motorola anymore. It was going to be purely Alps. But at that point in time, they had these 5 or 6 radios that have already been engineered.
Right.
They've been tooled. Everything was ready to go. And guess what? They needed a brand. They needed to call it something.
Right.
So that was in 1978. That was the step across the line to go away from Motorola and become what we all love at this point in time, which was Alpine Electronics.
How did the brand name Alpine become the choice? Were there any other names considered?
Well, remember, this thing is called the Alps Corporation
Right,
originally,
yeah,
and the owner loved the Alps. He loved it. When he was flying back and forth to Europe and whatnot, he'd fly over those mountains, and it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen.
Yeah.
But they didn't have a brand name for it. They couldn't call it Alps. They wanted to call it something else here.
Right.
So they went up to a little place called Anchorage, Alaska, because that was convenient for the Japanese to get to and convenient for the folks in the U.S. who were going to be the quote-unquote new distributing group. And they stayed at a place called the Captain Cook Hotel, which still exists. And in a relatively short period of time, they rubber-stamped a marketing idea, a brand, Alpine, because of the Alps, kind of worked, you know. And that was the birthplace of the brand Alpine Electronics.
Dave, how were you introduced to the Alps plan to bring mobile electronics to the USA?
That was a very, very, very interesting story because I was actually working with an organization that was, I needed a rep organization in San Francisco. We were selling automotive speakers at that point in time.
Okay.
I met with a guy named Reese Haggett. There's a name that'll go down in infamy for sure. I interviewed him for 3.5 hours. He said, by the way, at the end of the interview, you weren't interviewing me, I was interviewing you. I want you to be a part of this team that do Alpine Electronics. Wow. And that happened that fast. And he pulls out a couple of spec sheets. And I saw for the very first time the line that Alpine was going to be bringing into this country. This guy's name was Reese Haggett, and he was the #1 gringo that was hired by Alpine, by the Alps group.
Who were the other folks that made up the domestic founders?
Reese and I had a lot of buddies
Okay.
over the course of time, and that we had created really deep relationships with. And we actually went back to those guys and talked to them because, frankly, it was kind of hard to get anybody to make a step into a brand new startup company. Those companies failed all the time, especially back then. But we were able to use Reese's assets and my assets to put together another 4 guys that were going to be the management and sales group and marketing group for Alpine Electronics of America. And they all came with a great resume, which was super, and fortunately stayed with us for at least the first 5 to 8 years. Mm-hmm. And that was very, very important because they brought a lot of credibility to the Alpine at that point.
Now, Dave, you were a part of a special group. How many original guys are still around?
Speaking.
Yeah, really?
That's it. Every single one of those original six guys are no longer around anymore. So now you get me, and since Rich showed up about 6-8 months after I started with the company, you get Rich.
What did the radios look like?
They were stunning if you compare that to what was actually on the marketplace here in the U.S. These things were stunning, but they were expensive.
Well, Alpine was good looking. I love that head unit. They were the most popular head unit you could have ever have.
The first products at this point in time were all brushed aluminum.
Yeah, right.
They're beautiful had a dial.
Sure.
You don't see anything with dials nowadays,
No.
right? These things actually had a dial on them. They looked like home audio products.
Right.
They're fabulous, just fabulous.
When were Alpine USA's introduction plans in place?
We spent about 90 days, maybe a little longer than that, creating the infrastructure. We didn't have to worry about money. That's the one thing the Japanese were ready to finance this thing big time. But the infrastructure and the distribution mentality and all the rest of the stuff had to be homegrown. It was organic, and if we didn't do it right, it wasn't going to get done. So it took us about 90 days, maybe a little longer to get that completed. And then it was tested and approved and going through all those other gymnastics that you have to do at corporate level. But we were ready to hit the street running in April 1979.
Hey, Dave, how did you guys kick off the brand? From what I've heard, it was very detailed. Now, what was that all about? Was it fantasy or legit?
No, it was 100% legit. What we decided to do, since we're going to try something that hadn't been done before, the general idea from a marketing point of view was there were a lot of car audio companies that were out there, and it was kind of a circus. Nobody really had a marketing plan that was cohesive. They were all over the doggone place, and Reese and I decided the only way to do this thing right was to really do a super detailed approach. So we brought out about 75 reps that we had put on board. There's about 12 rep teams, 13 rep teams, but a total of 75 reps. We put them in a old DC-3 that landed at the Torrance Airport. I don't know if you ever knew this because you weren't around then, but we had chartered that doggone thing, and we flew everybody up to the Hyatt in Tahoe. And we locked them in a cage for 4 days, and we indoctrinated this entire group. By the time they left that building, these guys were eating, breathing, and crapping Alpine.
You guys sounded like you were already in the passing lane. What year did that happen, and why LA?
Alps Corporation was already deeply involved in OEM at that point in time. And what traditionally happens when you're working with OEM companies, especially if it's a Japanese operation, is you go where the largest operations are from an automotive point of operation, meaning where was Toyota, where was Honda, where was Mazda, where was Nissan. That was very, very important because the Japanese want to be very, very close to those guys. So coming to Torrance was an easy decision. because all three of those Japanese companies, or four of those Japanese companies, were here and doing business very well. And of course with Alpine, they already had a relationship with Honda, so they wanted to make absolutely sure they were as close to that customer as possible. But the management, and Rich will identify with this, were not pushing OEM at that point. We were pushing the aftermarket thing big time. But it was like one of those, again, organic situations where over time, both of those markets, aftermarket and OEM, are going to be symbiotic. They were definitely going to be there. But it was first with the aftermarket, and then OEM was right behind it.
How did the original USA distribution plan develop? From the outside, it seemed like all the retailers wanted to sell it, but only a handful were selected. Why not just go for it?
I know it sounds a little weird, doesn't it?
It does.
And that was the mistake that the other guys were making prior to Alpine coming in, because anybody that could fog a mirror was appointed as a dealer. We went at it a completely different way. My background, although it was no formal education, my background was really studying a lot of marketing and selective distribution. And I had a couple of buddies over at Yamaha that did it better than anybody, absolutely better than anybody. And they shared some tools that they use over there at the Yamaha group with their home audio division that really talked about certain markets and a market capacity before they talked about dealers. So what we did over the course of that planning period is we identified 360 ADIs, areas of dominant influence, that we put together, and we had census information that says these markets should yield this amount of sales. And by doing so, we could actually go to dealers in those ADIs and say, we're going to do this with you, and we're going to be predictable, because if we think we can sell this much product through this distribution that's in this ADI, we're not going to ask you to overperform elsewhere. And that way, year after year after year, if we come back and say, hey, we're going to try to grow 20% this year, 15% this year, if the dealers in that ADI could absorb that volume, guess what we did? We didn't add any dealers. And all of a sudden, the brand becomes much more precious to these doggone dealers, because they're not looking over their shoulder at somebody parachuting out of the sky and having a competitor right next to them.
Sounds like dealer additions were slow and deliberate.
Not only that, there were times, and I think Rich is probably better to talk about this than I, because he and his team had to deal with this at Consumer Electronics Show. We wouldn't let anybody in the booth unless they had an invitation.
You were very la-di-da.
You remember that?
Yep, I do.
It was war out there at the doorway for our booth.
Well, we started out basically a lot like the other vanilla face Japanese companies, where we had a couple of head units, and we had a few amplifiers, and we had a weak line of speakers. And we were going after a limited distribution channel, and it was a kind of a hard sell. So what we had to do is go back to the Japanese and push them to bring the technology up so that we were in line with our marketing direction. And this was a continuous war. I mean, this war went on for years. We eventually won because we had greater knowledge as to the application side of what was going on in this country over here, which ultimately was a global model, than the Japanese had. And when they started bringing the right products in and stuff, then the market really started to explode. Then it really started going.
But it didn't come without a lot of pain.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
And there was a big, big pain that I got to share with you guys at this point in time. Probably wouldn't have shared this 30 years ago, but I'll share it with you now. When the initial 5 models were introduced and came to the U.S., there was one model called the 7307 that was probably, and I still to this day don't know where this engineering came. I was talking with Rich about this the other day. This is a fabulous, absolutely fabulous product. But it shared one thing with 4 other items that were in the line at that point in time. And it was a, what do we call it? Glide eject?
Glide eject mechanism for the cassette player.
So what happens with the glide eject? Well, the dealers saw this and they went, yeah, baby. All right, tell me we can put this in front of a customer and it's going to do this and that and everything else.
Well, it made this really nice move where it would rise up and then come out so that you could daintily take the cassette out of the nose piece.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it was awesome. Perfect thing on a sales floor. Except,
Uh-oh.
didn't work.
Oh, blippity blip.
Blippity blip is right. Oh my gosh. So here we go with a blippity blip of the year.
Yeah, right.
So that we're seeing phone calls come in
Yeah.
from service about these things are not working. What's happening? And we had a situation down in Arizona that is somewhat, it is famous at this point in time as far as Alpine's concerned.
It slowly came back and bit us all in the ass.
It did.
Oh.
So we did. Well, it did and then it didn't, because it bit us short term in the ass, but in the long run it was pretty good. Because in Arizona we had a cowboy with his little old pick-em-up truck.
Oh, I heard about this story.
Oh, baby. He went out there and bought himself a $5,000 audio system in 1981.
Wow.
That's the equivalent of like 17 grand a day, okay?
Right.
And the dealer was, yeah, this is pretty cool, all right? The problem is, on the way home after he took delivery of this thing,
Yeah.
the little Willie Nelson tape that he had in there, started doing it, boom, ate it. So he goes home. That happened 3 times.
Oh, no.
The dealer's calling me, he says, Dave, I don't know what the heck's going on here, but this shit isn't working right now. Okay, let's get it back here. Let me see what's going on. Anyway, the 3rd time, or the 4th time, I guess, this guy went back to his home and did it again. And after a couple of Rocky Mountain Kool-Aids, he goes and does his, I'm going to take that radio out of there and kill it, you know. He actually went into his home with screwdriver in hand, runs out to the yard, took the radio out, boom, with a 357, shot a hole right through the middle of that damn thing, and took it to the dealer
Yeah.
the next day and said, please don't do this to me again. Okay, got their attention.
Right.
Make a long story short,
Okay.
that dealer was able to find one that actually worked,
Yes.
and he sent the product in to us, and my crack, brand new service team took a look at this thing, and they couldn't find out what was wrong with it. And they put a note on it, and they sent it back to the dealer and said, no trouble found. Could you believe that?
Wow.
And now, fast forward to at least 4 more years. Caesar had not heard about this story, and he was our El Presidente. And he heard about the story, and he gave me a call. He says, Black Sun, this is unbelievable. Do you have that radio still? I said, I think I do. I don't know, maybe. He said, well, I need it. I said, for what? Just get me that radio. Hang the phone up. Talk to my assistant. Do we got that radio around here? No.
Uh-oh.
We threw it away. The president just called me. He wants the damn radio. We got to come up with a radio. It's gone. But my assistant, Miss Helen, her hubby was the police department head in Torrance.
Oh.
So we found ourselves another one, and he shot it, and we sent it back to Caesar. Where did that radio go? To the engineering department. And it's sitting on a pedestal, and it goes round and round and round with the message, this is what happens when you design bad product in the United States. Wow. It is still there today.
So what was it like working with the Japanese?
You know, what's interesting, I'm going to let Rich answer this one first.
Okay.
Because this was my 2nd time around with the Japanese.
Yeah.
But I don't believe he ever worked with a Japanese company
What do you think,
before
Rich?
that, and I've never heard him answer that question.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when I was with Audio Mobile, I used to hide my technology from the Japanese.
You did?
I would take the pulse width modulating controllers and I would pot them, and then I would coat them with mu metal material so they couldn't x-ray them because I was sure they were just going to come and try and copy me. When I got over to Alpine and started working with the Japanese, they weren't interested so much in copying. They were just interested in getting by.
Is that right?
I used to have wars with these folks over the technology.
Yeah.
When I first joined the company, I was answering telephones as a tech services guy. Well, that changed very quickly because they needed the help very badly, but I had to sell it to them. And once I started working on design and coming out with working prototypes, it started changing things. They started coming closer and closer to what we wanted. The 3002, the 3008 was their first two amplifier products. They were horrible. They were terrible. They weren't even in the ballpark. The stuff I wanted was 3, 4, 5 times that.
Wow.
And so I made some samples. The samples went over to Japan. When they came back, I heard that my samples had failed. But what had failed? They disconnected all the thermal protection. So the product was destined to die. And it's because we were still having this issue with not invented here. That was the big issue with the Japanese. But once we became friends and started working together better, then we started realizing some new products.
It was my second time around working with the Japanese, and they are interesting people for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I've worked with said, you know, it's not so much to be able to speak Japanese. The key is to deal with the Japanese culture. If you find a way to deal with the Japanese culture, you're going to have friends for life all over the place. And I probably spend more of my time under those kind of circumstances than anything else. I understand the Japanese culture, and you know what? We want to share a little bit of that with you guys today.
Please do.
And they are what we all look at as a monoculture. So when you say something like red, everybody understands the red. It's not magenta or purple or anything else. It's red. It's an amazing way for those guys to approach life. I figured out over the course of time that being polite to people and being nice and courteous and all the rest of that stuff,
Which they are,
wins favors. And they are absolutely the most polite people on the planet.
Yeah, they are.
And for that, I absolutely love them. They're tough cookies when it comes to, especially the things that Rich had to deal with. But
Right.
for the most part, they are an absolute pleasure to work with, provided you meet them halfway culturally. So we're going to show you a few things that if you ever get a chance to go to Japan, you do these couple of things here, and you'll probably have a better trip if you do it. There is a massive amount of respect that is included in their culture to everybody, whether you're a little kid or you're a big shogun. Respect is a big part of the deal. So how you greet people is important. How you, especially in business, when you exchange business cards, didn't you find this out? It was one of these ceremonial type of things. And once you got a business card from the Japanese, you didn't stick it in your pocket. You had to put it on a table so you could actually remember and respect their name. It goes on to many other things, like the first time you go to with the Japanese to dinner. A lot of the American guys are somewhat rough on this stuff, but when they're eating with chopsticks and stuff like that, they'll stick their chopsticks in a bowl of rice at the end of the dinner. That's like committing hara-kiri, absolute hara-kiri in their culture. The other side of the culture situation is that Japanese tend to not make friends immediately. It really takes time. And once Rich got deeply involved with these guys, and then maybe after working with them for a year or so, things changed, didn't they?
Yeah, sure do.
And for us, it was like this, the sun opened up after a year or so when these people finally trusted you, because you weren't going to be Johnny-come-lately for a day and then gone out of their lives. And over the course of time, I think particularly Rich and I, we created enormously close relationships with all those guys to a point where if we needed to have something done and really done that's fast, we just called in the buddies that we had created these relationships over the course of time, and they did wonders for us. That normally will not happen if you're in a company that tends to fight back all the time. But when the trust level finally gets there at the level that you're at, they'll literally slay dragons for you. That's how great it was. Most of our communications, though, with them were primarily on the product side. And they were interested in marketing, but not to a point where they'd really dissect it. So it helped Rich probably more over that period of time than anything else as far as creating those relationships.
The Japanese basically were very strict in their engineering and manufacturing protocols. The Japanese will respect you and your strength if you present it the right way. If you throw it in their face, even if it's the best thing in the world, they'll turn around and walk away.
How involved in day-to-day operations was the Japanese management?
Initially, they were very much involved.
Yeah, day to day.
In creating the general marketing plans and the sales plans and the product plans and all the rest of that stuff. They were very, very deeply involved. And it's part, again, I think it's part of that relationship building situation. But at the end of the day, when you take a look at it, they funded that company with their cash from Japan. They funded the inventory for us. Everything was basically ready to go. And Caesar came to us and said, we approve the plan, we approve the budgets. It is now your responsibility to make this thing happen.
I see.
And we rarely talked to him after all that happened. Now, yes, there were meetings, yes, there were board meetings and all the rest of that stuff, but basically they were pretty hands-off. But working with the Japanese here in this country, there's a certain way that Japanese management works, and that is this thing called consensus management. There isn't one single subject that the Japanese board doesn't share with each other. And everybody is pretty much cognizant of each other's jobs. So if you had something to try to get done in this country, give me the ball, coach, I'll do it by myself. That never, ever happens in a Japanese company. Japanese companies have this thing called nimawashi. Nimawashi means you talk to people at your level and make sure everybody signs on 100% before you make a presentation of something like this to an executive board. And boy, that is so much better. It's just fantastic. The problem is Westerners are this way, all me. And the management team, it's like I tell you what to happen, and it all flows from top to bottom. In the Japanese, it doesn't work that way at all. It basically is, if there's 7 people that need to be in part of this decision, they all make the decision together. And it's a very effective way of making things happen.
So the original plan was to establish Alpine as the premier brand for car audio. Now, how was that accomplished?
Bits and pieces. It was primarily this guy right here
that
had more to do with it than anything else. So I'm going to let you, what was from a technical point of view, how'd you do it?
Well, the 7307 was a great piece. It had one mechanical flaw. And when that flaw was fixed, the sound quality, distortion, all the other factors that are important in that product were improved on. And at that time, I had just come from a company that was reputed for building the best amplifiers in the industry. And I had a lot to do with that. I came over to Alpine, and my new boss, who was Mr. Oki, he told me, of course, Alpine is best. And I told him, I said, no, it's not.
Oh.
And I butted heads with him. He took his jacket off and hung it up so he could chew me out the right way. And he said, so you can make better? And I said, yeah, I can. So they challenged me to build a better unit. And I went home and started making prototypes. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. And my coffee table was set up so that I could put a grid on it and lay circuit boards out. They didn't have computer programs then. You did it with tape and with little pads that you stuck on it. And you would reduce it 4 times and then shoot the board down from it. I would take those things home and build the circuit board up, put it in metal, which typically was taken from our other models, and take it in and demonstrate it to them. And I found that the best place to demonstrate this technology was to our dealers, not to the Japanese. Because the dealers would listen to it and say, that's what I want. I want that. And of course, the Japanese had no choice. They had to follow through. And it was back and forth and back and forth. The quality kept going up a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. We finally reached a point to where the dealers started seeing our brand in competition with Fosgate and with some of the other brands that were around at that time that we considered to be our competitors. We had good head units. Now we have some good amplifiers. We need speakers. We need speakers real bad because our speakers were, they were
okay.
So-so. We went to Pioneer, we went to some of these other people, and we tried buying them off the shelf and stuff. When we started going to American manufacturers, I went to C-Tech Gauss, I went to Dyne Audio, I went to Sears, I went to the French that had Polydax brands of speakers, which were actually very good quality. And we would bring these speakers in and do systems with them that sounded really good. That was a winning combination. Very slowly, we started coming around to the party. Once Alpine engineers in Japan started seeing what was necessary for us to win the war, they started contributing to it. And
it didn't happen fast. It took time.
Yeah, they started playing team ball with us. We totally pissed off the competition because we were coming on pretty strong.
Right.
Then we implemented marketing programs, and there were 3 books that we were required to read at Alpine: In Search of Excellence, Positioning, and Marketing Warfare. We studied those 3 books and applied them.
Yep.
And now we had a product that was pretty strong. We had a marketing plan that was pretty strong. We started putting those together and executing it. We had arrived. We were there.
It really started happening at that point. But I think also we had to make sure that the employees at that point really bought in to what was going on, because we were running around, Rich and I were seeing all this wonderful stuff that was happening.
Right.
But transferring that enthusiasm back inside was sometimes difficult. And that's really where the Alpine Touch really happened. Because an Alpine Touch to product development meant one thing.
Right.
Alpine Touch to a credit manager, that meant something else. Or Alpine Touch to an order entry person, that made me a different kind of thing. Because there's many ways to touch people.
How about the consumer?
You can touch them this way. Oh, the consumer, absolutely. But we had to get right internally first. But there's ways of doing this, right? There's an Alpine Touch is handshake and a hug.
Oh, yeah.
Or there's an Alpine Touch, bam!
Right.
And we wanted to make sure that every doggone time that phone rang at the company, everybody within the organization treats it as a opportunity.
What the Alpine Touch was, basically, was our products and our services.
Exactly.
And basically, once the products reached a level, and of course we were doing selective distribution, so we had products that our dealers could sell that their competitors couldn't sell.
Correct.
Because we controlled where we put the products out at. And we started developing programs to support this with these dealers. And it worked really good. I mean, at that point in time, they had a bunch of installers that were young kids with their first job. And they were taking brand new cars apart.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they really didn't understand how to tear door panels down, how to tear the dash down, how to put it all back together and make it work right.
Right.
And the dealers didn't realize how to sell this kind of technology. We convinced them that if they did a car that sounded really good, when a customer came in and listened to it, it was a sale. They closed the sale. We taught the dealers how to use their installers to take pictures of their work so they could sell the installation. We had things that our competitors weren't doing. Plus, we were answering their questions for the problems that they were having with these things. That just improved our relationship. I mean, I can't tell you how many friends I still have out there that are old men now that were young people at that time. That's right. That's right. And I mean, all over the world. This went all over the world. It worked in Japan. It worked in Asia, Oceania. It worked in Europe. It worked in South America.
It did.
It worked well.
We were in the process of turning over some of our key employees at that point in time, and we had some of these guys that were working with other brands, other high-profile brands like a Kenwood or Sony or whatever, and they come in, and we'd sit down with them for a while. And I had this one guy, and I love him as of today, but I couldn't believe what he'd said. He asked me, what is the most important thing about our company at this point in time? And I said, predictability. Oh, you can't do that. Predictability? You can't. If you can be predicted, then you can be beat. You need to be not predictable. And I said, no, that's the difference between where you were and now you're no longer, and then coming to us as Alpine. We want to be so predictable, it's unbelievable. We tell the dealers the truth. We give them it. Sometimes it doesn't feel real good, but we make sure they understand the objectives, the protocols, everything that we're looking for, and they're in control of their own at that point in time. If they want to grow, they can grow. If they don't want to grow, they can grow, but they never have to look at Alpine and say, you guys are nuts because you're not predictable. We were probably the most predictable consumer electronics car audio brand on the planet.
And they loved it.
They loved it. And therefore, this dealer council situation kept our nose clean on this subject. So we went ahead after that 7307 mess, and we said, we're going to take 10 or 12 real high-profile dealers and bring them in and let them point fingers. Because this time we knew where they're going to point the fingers.
Right.
They're going to point it at us because
Right.
we had screwed up so bad. But how we fixed that, the process of doing that turned us into a predictable organization because we never let anybody get hurt with any of those things. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you even know this, but we ended up having to destroy about 300 units that were brand new of that product. We had to grind them up because we didn't want to let that stuff go back into the field. Unbelievable, huh?
That's quality control.
We set a
Big
very,
time.
very high spec for ourselves.
Big time. Thank God for the Japanese that helped support that situation because they understood, particularly with our OEM relationships, you can't do that kind of situation at all. Some of these other guys that were a little smaller people, if they had to go grind up 200 or 300 units, it bankrupt them.
Right.
But we just bit the bullet and took care of it, and it came back and paid the spade.
The thing I liked about dealer councils is a lot of these guys were my friends.
Yeah.
I would lobby them prior to the council so that they knew what we were thinking about and where we should be going. And they would come in with a lot more force into that meeting. I mean, we had one guy that was going to throw chairs one time in the middle of one of our meetings. And it was because he was passionate about what we were doing. He was actually supporting us.
And it wasn't just product. I mean, when these dealer councils, it started out with product, but it was also do a forensic on your marketing, do a forensic on your policies,
Right.
do a forensic on everything, you know. And boy, these dealer council guys really took on a responsibility to help guide the company. You know what a president's not a president? When they're in a board of director meeting, they're not a president anymore because they have to execute.
Oh.
The dealer council was what? Our board. And we had them back. Most of them were returnees all the time. And they remember from the previous meeting, and they want to make sure that we were accountable for what we said we were going to do.
Yeah.
And by gosh, if we didn't, those fingers would start pointing once again. So it was a cherished piece of the puzzle. And I think we had a total of 15. We did it every year for almost 15 years. I don't know that it's still being done at this point in time. Maybe not.
Well, the dealer council, really, they came in with an open agenda. They could bring up anything they wanted in that council about us. I'd say they're about 50% product, 50% marketing. And on the product side, we usually had some of the Japanese engineers with us. And they would sit there and act like they didn't understand anything, but they did. And the dealers helped us get a lot of the things that we needed. Not just stuff we wanted, but stuff we needed to grow the company. So it allowed us to access the engineering in Japan and push that button that says, get started, get going, time to move.
It really reinforced a lot of the ongoing discussions that Rich and his PD&E team had as far as product development. When your customer, the dealer, the customer says, I'll buy this if you do this. Hearing it from Rich or hearing it from his people, sometimes the Japanese, that's just chatter, because everybody wants something. But when the customers are sitting in an environment with other dealers, and we put a product up on the slide that says, here's what we're thinking about for the ensuing next year, and they all go, my God, that's what really works with the Japanese. And that, frankly, was a big point of these dealer councils as time went on. We do that with policies, we do that with all kinds of things. So I think, if you talk about investments, other than the national sales meeting, dealer council was probably the second most important thing that we did.
We had a dealer council at the Marriott Hotel in Torrance. One of our dealers was out in the hallway with myself. This guy comes in that was shooting a video there from what's called the Green Machine. He looked like a biker, big beefy guy with crazy hair, and he was completely green, like the Hulk. And I told him, I said, there's a meeting in there right now that really needs for you to go in and see it. And he says, what is it? And I told him, it's our dealer council. And he says, I'll do whatever you want. So I said, okay, you need to go in there and close the door behind yourself and look into the group and say, which one of you some bitches is Reese Haggett? And he just went ahead and did it. And when he did that, the room was quiet for just a second, and then it just roared. We had to run the full length of the hotel in the hall and hide in the bathroom out by the check-in area. And the next thing we know, here comes all these other guys from the meeting in there.
There's something that happened that they didn't see,
Yeah,
because I was in the
outside.
meeting,
Okay.
and he didn't get a chance to see this. But when this thing, giant guy, with paint all over him and all this stuff, he was angry. He did a hell of a job. He came in there and said, "Who the heck is Reese Haggett?"
He looked like he was going to
And Reese is sitting there at the end of the room, and he goes, "This."
He's pointing
over
at
there.
everybody else.
And everybody broke out. That's what the laughing was all about. It was actually, I don't know if he was.
It was what that meeting needed.
It did.
Right.
It was going a little dry at that point in time, but it was funnier than heck.
Well, I remember the slogan at Alpine, you work hard and play hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a big slogan, right?
That was Caesar Ishiguro's
That's right. That was
thing.
Mr. Ishiguro's,
That was
thing.
what it was. And boy, they did it. Every time we go to Japan or every time they'd come here, it was like 24/7 until they leave.
Right.
And you played real hard. And you worked real hard.
And
And
was
we
good
did
for
play
the
hard
company.
now and then.
It was
I
great
could
for the
tell you
company.
some things that we did that would probably mean, nope, cut, get that out of here. That can't be on this tape. But things that we did.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to spend a lot of time staying at Chota Hotel in Iwaki City. And the bed was too short. The pillow was full of beans. And the shower you had to duck to get in. And that's where I stayed. Every morning I'd come down. There would be a Mormon missionary waiting because I was the only English guy he could talk to. And I was over at the factory in there. I guess they called it the dream area. They called me the dreamer because I was always asking for new stuff.
Yeah.
And so they built this room called the Dream Room. It had these terraced, carpeted, padded areas for their engineers to go sit and dream because they figured that's what worked. I went into the building one time to use the bathroom, and they have these holes in the floor.
Oh, yes.
They don't even give you anything to hang on to keep from crapping on your pants. And I went in and I didn't use it. I went into another restroom. It had leather walls,
Yes.
leather seat on the toilet.
It was a Toto toilet, probably.
I don't know, but it had a bidet and the whole thing.
Right, right.
And it was a manager's toilet.
Oh, I see.
When I came out of there, the head of marketing in their marketing group got right in my face and started yelling at me in Japanese and chewing me out so all the other Japanese could see that I was getting my butt kicked. We used to have a lot of fun, but sometimes it was fun at somebody else's expense. But we stuck to doing our job as good as we could. And I had some guys, Ken Koga, Doug Moyer, Glenn Cass, and Matt Ayala.
Yeah.
That was my team.
Yeah.
These guys were all good technicians.
Yep.
They were all really good technicians. And we were the ones that built the products out back and tested them in cars. And then we would get the Japanese to build the same things for us. And it worked. It worked very well for us. But these guys were crazy.
The
We
sales
were-
and marketing guys were a heck of a lot more civilized.
We were all
We-
considered crazy. But that's all right.
The other side of this whole process, though, was Rich was overseas darn near as much as I was because he was managing this gate team. He created it, not managed, he created the darn thing. And what was happening is that he becomes almost a disciple of how to do things right in an installation bay. And there was a project that Alpine had called Marketing Corporate Identity, MCI.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is that the marketing guys, even the tech group, they had a chance to talk to their constituents from these other markets. And I was involved in the marketing and sales side, and literally every single thing that I did over the course of the time that I was in Japan was shared with Europe, with Asia, with around the world. Why? Marketing corporate identity. So in other words, if it was a Lamborghini or it was a project like Gate, all the markets were doing the same thing. And they were compelled, literally compelled by management to follow those stipulations.
Part of our
And it made it so
globalization
easy.
process.
And one asked why? Why? And old Caesar did it again. He said, you know, what you guys don't seem to understand, being from the United States, is that you guys fart and it's smelled around the world. There's that much influence coming out of the US.
Wow.
You do it in music, you do it in Hollywood, and you do it in this business as well.
That's right.
So if we get it right in the US, that's why we spend so much time with you guys, we get it right around the globe.
Yeah.
And they were 100% right on that.
It was a great experience.
That's right.
Alpine, as far as all the places I've worked, was the greatest
The best.
experience for my life.
Me too.
What kind of assets were you looking for dealer candidates?
Well, if you ask him, he always goes through the back door,
Right.
literally, because he sends his people to evaluate a dealer. The first place they go is the installation base. So some of the assets you were looking for?
And we installed. My team and myself, we did cars every day out back. And the dealers knew that after they saw the jobs we did. They realized we were paying the same dues as them. And of course, the dealers want to get everything they can out of a company. So when they would come into these dealer councils and stuff, they would typically come to us and say, Kenwood's doing that, or Sony is doing this. And we would take that information down. When we did seminars, and we did them all over the world, the first thing I would do in a seminar was I would test everybody in the room. What that did was that shut up the mouths of the people that were not real nice, that were just there to get attention. And at the same time, there's a lot of installers would come in. You ask them how to use a diode to clamp the spike off of a relay. A very simple thing, but they didn't understand it. We taught them. We taught them how to use calculators to design passive networks for speaker systems. We taught them acoustic principles about the car. And in this seminar, we would have them critique Alpine's product line, one end to the other. I could come back after being out on the road with a pile of data this tall that I could take to the Japanese, and it was a win-win situation.
Absolutely.
It was a win-win situation.
On the marketing side, though, we had to be really careful because this limited distribution or controlled distribution plan that we did had to make sure that we identified the capacity of a little, what I call independent specialists. Most of those companies were, small, meaning they were under $1 million in sales, and there was, when you take away the margin and all the rest of that stuff, there was only a buying capacity of maybe $400,000. Well, if in those kinds of formulas, we wanted to make sure that those particular guys we were looking at had the capacity to give us a minimum of somewhere between 20 and 25% of their business, because we could not make the sales and distribution program happen unless we did that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So we were going through the front door, which is what we did. We just made doggone sure that was there with those kind of numbers, and our credit department was really, really strong asset for us as well, because we didn't offer COD. We wouldn't let anybody buy the product cash. You had to be credit worthy. You had to tell us who you were doing business with. And you know what happened? That credit department reported to the marketing department all the time about what? We knew who their strongest suppliers were. So if we saw a situation that didn't fit our idea, we would slow walk it. If it was one that fit our idea, it would be an instant, let's go. Mm-hmm. And that scenario really helped us in the early stages.
Well, and it's interesting. It's some of the places that I went and did seminars. In Japan, at the Disneyland Hotel, the most beautiful venue in the world. Teak desks with banker's lights on terraces all the way around the room. I'm on a round stage with a curtain across it that rotates, so they're setting up one set while I'm working another. And most of the people in that group were elderly. They weren't young entrepreneurs. These guys were people that were selling Deist fire suits, Cooney carburetors, racing equipment for cars, and they all had lifts in their stores. I went around and visited dealers in Tokyo. The worst dealer I saw was called Autoback.
But think about that for a second. That is a different type of dealer that the Japan used over there, the Autobox type of guys.
They were looking
And,
for...
and what has happened now is a lot of the dealers now here are having to do the same thing. There's a lot of automotive parts that are showing up in these places because the market is so soft for traditional car audio type product because of these damn OEMs that have done such a good job.
I see how the aftermarket plan was showing signs of transformation. Can you guys shed some light on how Alpine felt about it?
It was a wild time for sure. So if we auto-reverse ourselves all the way back to the 4-track, 8-track, you take a look at the formats that had been introduced over that course of, say, a 15-year period. You dealt with 4-track, you dealt with 8-track, you deal with cassette, you deal with CD, DAT, and in 4 months or a year, the playback format is gone. In our case, Alps was supplying pickup tape heads to a heck of a lot of suppliers, some of ours, but they kept the best stuff for us. So it was easy for us to kind of say, hey, our stuff's better because we know what everybody else is buying from Alps. And it was easy to defend our position. You remember those days, Marketing Warfare 101. But you know what happened with CD? The playing field did this.
Oh, yeah.
Because CD was CD, and that means, oh my gosh, these pickups are very, very similar at that point in time. Yeah, there were some, anyway, if you're a Batman, you could hear a difference here and there. But basically, the format really was an industry equalizer. So we had to come
Sony
up.
and Philips owned it at that time.
We had to come up with new ideas. There was absolutely no choice. So we couldn't use the old traditional things that we had done in the past. It helped us survive a lot better, especially with the CD products that we're building. And it changed engineering's opinion from just a single play CD to maybe doing something more dramatic. And that drama was in the CD changer applications.
Yeah, and of course we were still making mistakes at that point in time. We came out with a cassette changer, and that made us take a real serious look at that whole category. And we immediately went to a CD changer. And our engineering was kind of isolated a little bit because we were up in Fukushima Prefecture. We were hundreds of miles away from Tokyo. A lot of these companies had their engineering down in Tokyo. And so we had to push hard on our engineers. And basically the way we would do it is study our competition. And once they got a hold of it, and because of some of the resources which were core to our company, we were able to just shoot right past a lot of these guys.
I remember when I first saw that CD go into the dashboard, I was fascinated for some reason.
Glide eject. Different kind of glide eject this time.
Hey,
that one worked.
You know, it was really tough to be a consumer then. A simple radio replacement could be costly and obsolete. How did you guys think that through?
That's true. That kind of thing happened. But there were other little things that kind of drove everybody nuts. There was a point in time when pull-out radios, I don't know if you've ever seen those things, but these pull-out radios were happening like crazy in Europe because everybody was stealing product all over the place.
Yeah.
And so Rich and his team and our marketing group just slammed their hands down on the table, and the dealers at the dealer council, you've got to provide us with a pull-out radio, period, end of discussion. Now the Japanese looked at that and they went, that's low-tech.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
That's real low-tech.
Right.
But yeah, you had to have it.
Although
because the consumer could end
up
up buying 4 or 5 radios and replacing them all the time if we didn't.
Alpine was the favorite of thieves.
Oh, absolutely.
They would look in there and they'd see those little ice cubes, is what I call them.
Yep.
and that showed that thief that
Yep.
that was a quality radio. But then I believe instead of the pullout that you were talking about, Alpine came up with taking the face off.
Right. That's a higher tech approach.
No kidding.
That's the difference. So that original idea of a slam bam thank you ma'am type of pull-out radio went on to be a lot more sophisticated. But I'll tell you, there was still some of the dealers that said
They didn't like that?
they want to keep that good old pull-out radio because you still left a head unit in the car when the face was off.
They'd look in the trunk.
It was, that's what
Really?
happened. So it fixed itself over time, but it was kind of a weird bumpy ride there for a while, wasn't it?
Yep, sure was.
Dave, how did Alpine provide the means to bridge that reality?
There was a point in time when that cassette changer needed to morph to a CD type changer. Alpine put a ton of money behind this whole idea of having the first multi-disc changer for the aftermarket. And what was happening there was kind of interesting because we knew that OEM was very interested in that project as well, especially Mercedes-Benz, if I recall. What was going on is that Caesar came to me at a meeting when we were over in Japan. He says, listen, I've got some good news for you and some bad news. And then I said, what's that? And he says, well, it looks like the OEMs are going to pick up the CD changer business. I went, oh, yeah, you're really, because the aftermarket can't interface with that. He says, I told you I got some good news. We put an aftermarket plug on the back of the control unit. So actually what could happen now is your aftermarket dealers have the ability to go ahead and sell a aftermarket Alpine changer and hook it right into an OEM product.
Wow.
And he says, Dave, this is not going to last long because there will be some pushback at some point. But for right now, that's an olive branch to the aftermarket to help us become CD dominant. Wow. You remember those?
Oh, yeah.
It was unbelievable.
Because CDs were coming out at record stores and I mean right and left. That was the
Absolutely.
Get away from vinyl, let's go to CD.
And for a couple of years, we were able to market with the OEM for the first time. But then there was a problem, and we knew it was coming. It was just a matter of time when one of the major OEMs came back and said, hey, why is an aftermarket product able to talk to our OEM product? This is a problem. We gave them the rationalization on why we did it, and they bought off on it.
Yeah.
But they also brought a guillotine to that meeting. And that guillotine was the software is going to change. Those changers are going to work only with our OEM products, if it's OEM. So unfortunately, that was the end of that ride. But what it really did is it took Alpine and just propelled it into this position of number one on the OEM side, number one on the aftermarket side there for a while. So anybody you talk to at that point in time, as far as head units is concerned, Alpine was the go-to period.
You know, during the first few years of operation, the Alpine USA product development and engineering guys were working overtime. Now, how was Alpine able to stay on top of those subjects?
The door was closing. I know this was mid-'80s, and you could, even at those days, you could see where OEM was going to pretty much come in and control the future of a heck of a lot of things in the aftermarket. But our idea was then, okay, let's play a different role here and maybe look at other categories within the group and flush out additional revenue by selling amplifiers and speakers. But again, we were with these dealers that were really, really high-end folks. We don't just automatically say, oh, by the way, we want you to buy our speakers or buy our amplifiers, and then pray like hell it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So back to Rich, there had to be some big changes in our marketing and product PD&E group, as we say, to be able to focus as much as we can on head units for as long as it'll last. But the reality was we had to flush out those other categories of speakers and amplifiers.
Alpine spent a lot of time and money communicating directly to its dealer network. Now, how was that accomplished, Dave?
We said the only way we could pull off this marketing situation was to be so close to these dealers that it was almost illegal. And we did that. We decided that the only way to get a legitimate position, a confident little position with these dealers, was to show them things that they've never seen before in their lives. And these guys were a bunch of independent dealers, you know. So what we did, and I have to thank Rich particularly him because this killed him. We put our dealers in a dealer convention environment every year for 13 years straight. We spent in excess of 7 figures every year on these dealer meetings. Mm-hmm. We'd fly anywhere between, at the early stages, 250 to 300, to the end of stage, over 1,000 dealers and their wives,
right,
to national sales meetings that were in the most exotic places on the planet. And for 2 days, we would sit there from a marketing and policy point of view and indoctrinate and improve, be predictable, be predictable. Rich would grab the owners and some of the other folks that were there and put them through this enormous, I guess, what do you want to call that? Indoctrination on new products and some of the things that are going to be required on the installation side to be able to deal with these things. And we did that for, again, 13 years. It was probably the most expensive marketing project that we had, but it was also the most effective.
And they were listening.
Oh, were they ever. You know, the other thing was we didn't BS them.
Right.
We stood on stage, and I'm going to play a little clip here you're going to see. We had a whole problem with a thing called transshipping. That means you sell product to a dealer, and that dealer was destined to be sold to a customer. Mm. But in some cases, because Alpine was so darn popular, and we were predictable, we weren't selling it to everybody else, that the dealer would sometimes leak it to other dealers around town. And I'm telling you, we got up in front of our dealers, or I did, especially at one time in Maui, and I told them, you're either going to follow these policies or we're going to be unpredictable. Mm. And we'll sell everybody. That's not a good thing.
No.
The dealers roared when I told them, don't come to me if you're transshipping, because I'm not going to give you a get out of jail pass. And they all went crazy. They loved it.
During the introduction phase, who did Alpine see as their primary competition?
Well, the Japanese used to call it the Alpine-Sony Pioneer War because they were still thinking head units. But we expanded that in this country over here to the major amplifier and speaker manufacturers, because that's a whole new category for us to grow into. And at one point in time, we were #1 in head units, #1 in speakers, and #1 in amplifiers and processors. Oh, yeah. In the industry. We were the #1 brand.
Right. When we first hit the street, there was a company, a famous Bosch company called Blaupunkt.
Oh, yeah.
And
German.
They were terrific.
Yeah.
You know, they really did a good job. There was a couple of others also. The problem was, when we hit the streets with our initial stuff, it was all brushed aluminum, silver-looking stuff. And it didn't look right into a Porsche, and it didn't look right into BMWs. Mm-hmm. So we had to come back and do a little bit of rethinking as far as the cosmetics are concerned. But Blaupunkt was a very, very strong company, and for where they were then, as far as their relationship with their European car manufacturers, we literally in 10 years damn near put them out of business. Because when we finally changed our cosmetics so they would blend a lot better with the Porsches and the Audis and whatnot from a European point of view, the selection was we wanted better audio. And we were much better in that category than Blaupunkt. On the racetrack, our audio performance, far exceeded that of the Bosch guys.
You know, brand building in the initial stages could get costly. How did Alpine craft a step-by-step consumer rollout? How did that work?
Again, a lot of patience, and this time, some luck.
Okay.
Startups they're really, really expensive. But what ended up happening with us, there's 2 things that I think were absolutely brand-building, excellent situations. One of them, in Hollywood, when you're doing all kinds of crazy things and trying to promote stuff.
Right.
The movie studios run around begging for parts, and you don't get those parts back. You just loan them to the studio and maybe get a camera shot or 2, within the movie.
Yeah.
So knock, knock, knock. We were doing pretty good. The good old Alpine brand was starting to become a lot more important out there.
Yeah.
We're seeing it in songs now, rap songs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we had one of these solicitors come to us and say, hey, we're going to do this movie called Over the Top. It was a Sylvester Stallone movie.
Okay.
And a lot of the scenes are shot in the cab of a huge 16-wheel truck. And we think there's going to be a lot of on-camera stuff where your brand could be shown here, but no guarantees.
Right.
Because if we decide not to do it in the truck, it's over and you never get the product back.
Right.
So I told the marketing guy, this is worth a roll of the bones. Let's give this thing a shot. So we gave him a radio, we gave him a pair of the Alpine speakers that we had. We ended up with about 30 seconds or so of branding that probably is worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Just that one
with
scene
Sylvester Stallone and his co-star at that point in time playing around with a radio on the dash of a 16-wheeler.
That was a great shot.
And it really was awesome, absolutely awesome. And then, believe it or not, right around that same time, there was another little movie called Cannonball Run. Have you not heard about that?
Yeah.
And what was going on with Cannonball Run? Biggest thing was the black Lamborghini running from New York to Los Angeles and God knows how fast. Well, guess what? Radio was in that Lamborghini.
Wow.
That was Alpine's radio. This was also a little bit of a luck situation because roughly at that point in time, I was informed from Japan that Alpine had been selected by Lamborghini as the radio of record in the Countach. Now, they don't build a lot of Countaches. There was only about 600, I think, or so that year that were actually made, but they all had Alpine radios in them. And what ends up happening is the consumer at 1 + 1 = brand equals Lamborghini equals Alpine. That relationship lasted for 15 years.
Oh, yeah.
And it was likely one of, if not the most important co-branding relationships that we had. It literally made the company.
Well, you see it all over. I mean, I see the Lamborghini and Alpine posters in stores, and to this day, they're like a piece of art.
They are a piece of art at this point.
Dave, I want to know who jumped on the Lamborghini poster co-branding idea.
The OEM relationship was with Alpine of Japan. They were the ones that did actually the first idea of producing a co-branding poster. And it was extremely successful. As a matter of fact, there was a point in time when I think it was for a holiday ad, I think that we did, where we sent that particular image out to and put it in the magazines that were doing advertising in at that point in time and said, hey, if you take this little coupon, the bottom right-hand corner of this ad, and to one of your local Alpine dealers, you can have one of these posters for a couple of bucks. And we went through about 30,000 of these damn things. It was incredible. I think every teenager and every young adult that was interested in car audio had one of these things hanging in their bedroom or their garage or something along those lines. And to this day, it's still quite that's why we brought it back. I mean, there's an opportunity here to play with the poster for another few years, and then we're going to ride off into the sunset. But I have to tell you a funny story, and I don't know if you know about this one either, but there is a slide that will back this thing up. We did one of the ads for a holiday. It said, deck your halls with a red Lamborghini, which was, the poster. Mm-hmm. And they had to go through us in marketing to be able to qualify for this thing. And when I started hearing all these little screams in the marketing department, I'd be like, oh, whoa, what's happening? Whoa. And you know what was happening? And I didn't know it at the point in time? We were advertising in Penthouse magazine. On the back of that coupon, I'll let you put two and two together.
Yes, I understand.
There was something on the back of that coupon that I don't want to talk about right. It was unbelievable.
Now, about the Alpine Lamborghini relationship, what happened there?
Nothing bad. It was good. Problem is that it came to an end. So Lamborghini was going through owner after owner after owner. And the last project that we had done for them as far as getting a sound system put in one of the Lamborghinis is this one right here. Mm-hmm. Rich and his team and worked with the Lamborghini guys over in Italy and designed the complete system for the Lamborghini Diablo. But that was the last one because Shortly after the Diablo was introduced, Chrysler sold Lamborghini to another buyer.
Oh, wow.
And at that point in time, we no longer had a relationship with those guys. But what happened during the time prior to that is what's important, because there was 4 Lamborghini posters that actually were done under our stewardship, so to speak. And these posters are still to this day probably one of the most legacy-driven type of tools you've ever seen. And everybody has heard about them, which is really cool.
Oh, yeah.
We decided to take the posters and move them to a completely different level. We created a relationship with a company called Hahnemühle, which is a 450-year-old paper company in Germany that developed paper, which actually is not even paper, it's cotton, pressed cotton, where we have collector sets now. But I tell you, when you hold one of these collector set posters up against some of the old ones, it's one of these kind of things you just go, yep, that was Alpine.
That buttons up our first episode. Next, we're going to dive into more of the nuts and bolts of Alpine's legacy, activities, products, and especially my personal favorite, Car Audio Nationals, and Alpine's Gate project, which paved the way for many new products. The Alpine Touch.